Hey guys, before I get into today's video, here's a little disclaimer. For whatever reason, the footage didn't export, though I was able to see the footage of what I filmed on my computer in my editing program. When I exported it, there was just nothing, blackness, and I couldn't... With something in my teeth. It's called strawberry because I'm drinking strawberry, carrot, mint, apple, and pear juice. So, sorry about that little thingamajig. I couldn't export the footage. The audio was fine, but for whatever reason it did have a hiccup on the video and I couldn't repair it. I don't even know where this comes from. I have to check in depth. So for me, in order to put the video up in time, I had to improvise, which means I had to use this camera, getting the footage on full screen mode on my computer and film it with this camera, whatever is on the computer. So you have a little bit of a grainy computer screen feeling and tint on it, but this is the only thing I could come up with on how to save the footage because I can't refilm and still have it visible for you guys. So sorry for the fisheye look and the not so great quality of the video. Audio is fine, so I hope you forgive me, and I'm trying to repair that. And now let's go into the video. Good morning and happy Art Day. I hope you're doing good. And I am back with another character picture for my DSA group. This is not a character that I am playing, but this is a character of the character of Sebastian's mom. She is playing, I think it's, well, she could be a Rondra priest or a fighter. I'm not sure yet. We haven't met each other in the tavern yet, so we don't know each other, but she described her character to me after I posted a picture of Agilia, my dwarf from last Art Day. And she said, "Oh, this is lovely. I want one too, but I can only draw stick figures." And I said, you know, just describe your character to me and I'm going to paint it for you. So I did. This time I went a little bigger with a DSA because she has a different type of character sheet than I'm having, so she can put it in there. Or she was saying after she saw the picture, like, maybe I frame it and put it into my game room. I'm not sure yet. So I went with a bigger size because it was quite difficult for me to draw the smaller size and get a lot of detail in. And for that day that I recorded this video, I had planned to paint another character picture that's going to come up in 2 weeks, and that's going to be on a smaller piece again. So I just wanted to, well, put as little pressure on my precious hands that I could, so I went with a bigger size for her character. And also she's playing a tall character, so I think it just fits to have her in more like a DSA, so that's like 17 by 20 centimeters, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure. No, almost 30 centimeters. Anyways, DSA, that's the size of the picture. So I went with that, started with a Payne's Gray because she's having a metal armor. So I just went all around my sketch and colored in the pieces that are metal armor. And the difference between the picture that I painted before, which I painted the night before I painted this, was I went with all the pieces that were the same color, put down the pencil, and then only liquefied the pigment. That's the word. So I didn't go top to bottom, coloring bits and pieces that were adjacent to each other, because I kind of had the color scheme down when I painted her. I did look up some of the illustrations on the web for her cloak and her armor and such. So to be correct with the colors that I chose for her picture. So I had the color scheme down before I even started painting, which was not the case in last time's ArtDay. And that is just the difference between the two when it comes to technique or the oh gosh, words. It's so bad. I do have the German word in my mind. Maybe it works just like actually a couple of minutes ago when I voiced over Gilia's video. So the German word is Reihenfolge. And I'm hoping now that my mind will translate it into English while I talk. And then I come up with a word in a hot second. So it's just I almost had it. The sequence, no, it's very close to sequence. It's I don't want to look it up on the web. I'm stubborn. Sheesh. Maybe I should, but it's just the Reihenfolge, in which I color. So, meaning all the metal parts first, waiting for a minute, then choosing a new or a different kind of pencil, then going for the clothes she wears underneath. So I gave her like a dark brown burlap or maybe leathery kind of a clothing underneath. I wanted to have something very dark because her cloak and her robe is actually very light. It's almost white with a tiny little bit of gray that I'm going to put in. So I wanted to have a lot of contrast. That's why I chose dark brown for her clothing underneath the armor. And I think I chose oak as a color of the Inktense, and bark, which is a very dark brown and very nice for shading. I really liked it a lot. I used that on my dwarf as well, on the hair. But this time around, I'm going with the same colors for different parts of a character, and it looks different, but still kind of the same, if you know what I mean, when it comes to what colors transport what kind of a feeling or what kind of a look. Dark brown in this case, just for me, it transports the feeling of, okay, we are back in the olden times. This is not modern. This is Middle Ages. This is fantasy world. This is what we know from the times we had kings and knights and such. So, yeah, you know what I mean. So I went with all the dark brown parts, put down the pigment, liquefied it, and the time between me putting down the pencils and then going in with water is enough to not have the metal armor part next to the brown parts liquefy. They're dried already. I'm painting with one of the brushes, one of those barrel brushes, that do not squirt a lot of water, but only a little bit, or like if I squeeze the barrel, that could be like a medium amount of water. So I don't have any bleeding going on. It's very controllable, and I like that a lot. I could have taken like a normal synthetic brush, but then I could run into the problem of maybe having some bleeding going on, because those brushes can hold way more water, and it's a little less controllable. I do like the synthetic brushes with watercolor. I do like those barrel brushes here with the Inktense. It's just a preference, both works. So if you don't have these barrel brushes, no worries, just take a small brush that cannot hold a huge amount of water when you want to have a little more of a controlled way of liquefying your pigment. After that, I went on with the lighter brown, a little more of a reddish tone, because I wanted the leather string here of the sword and the belt be different than the dark brown clothing I gave her. I wanted to have contrast. I wanted to have a little more of a slight difference in coloring when it came to the certain items that she's wearing. Though I used the same shading color, so I used bark again for shading. And that ties all of the objects together, but still the lighter base tone, so the lighter brown, gives it enough of a difference. You can distinguish pieces a little more. Maybe not so much on camera. Yeah, kind of ish. But in real life, the belt is way, way lighter than the dark clothing. And that just is something that I wanted to achieve for the character. Another good tip for you not rushing through painting and then running into the problem of maybe some part of the painting isn't dry yet, and you have bleeding going on later on that you don't want. Have a beverage next to you and drink 1 or 2 sips, preferably a hot beverage, which you just can't gulp. And drink a sip or 2, then go to the next pencil, and then color your, next section, and only then liquefy. My choice of beverage is Earl Grey tea with a little bit of honey, and like that I stay hydrated, and because I sometimes forget to drink throughout the day, or drink enough, actually. And also it prevents me from rushing through certain parts of painting. So then I went in with a white pencil, and I put down a tiny little bit. I did sketch with a yellow graphite pencil, and some of the yellow transfers to the white section. It's hardly visible on camera. But it actually helped to, not have the cloak or the robe look flat. I had to be very careful around the red lion on the chest area. But I stayed away from the lion far enough because I didn't want to accidentally pick up any pigment from the red and have it smear onto the white-ish cloak. So I went on to the sword, and I chose to add a little bit of indigo, give it a bluer tint, and like that have it look different than the armor. It's still close enough because Payne's Gray, the color that I also used on the sword and on the armor, has a bluish tint, but just having that tiny little bit of indigo added actually made a difference between the armor and the sword. It's very, very subtle, but it is there. And then I chose the black outliner pencil of the Inktense set. It's not really, you can't really liquefy the pigment. It stays where you put it down. You can push it a tiny little bit, but hardly. So I used that for the robe, and then I went in with a very, very light touch of Payne's Gray to shade the cloak and give it some folds. Went in with my pencil again, my brush again, liquefied that, and it's just shading the white robe, shading something white on a small-ish kind of painting with Inktense is quite difficult. There are other media where it is way easier, for example, watercolors, or if you go with colored pencils, you get very, very light grays, which is not the case in Inktense. So you gotta get around that by using very little pigment only, and then go on shading things. But I didn't want to use another medium. I didn't want to bring in watercolors or anything else. So I opted for a very, very light touch of Payne's Gray. So just adding a little bit of shading with a black pencil. I think I chose Indian ink. I'm not all that sure though. You gotta read that up on my blog. I listed all of the pencils and such there in case you like the color combo and have the full set of the pencils. You can read that up. The link is, excuse me, in the description box below. It's pinselgeschichten.de, and you just enter the name of the video into the search bar and you will be directed to the according post. And Aldare Leuenzorn, I should actually, well, we're playing in a German group, so I should not give her an English pronunciation. Let me give you the German one. It's very similar. She's called Aldare Leuenzorn. And if you enter that into the search bar, you will see all the pencils that I used to paint her. So again, another huge sip of tea before I go on coloring some more. Oh yeah, her whatever cloak holders. Pins, I don't know. I used a tiny little bit of the black on the sword as well, just to shade it a tiny little bit, give it more of a dimension. And then I went on to the face. I used, I think it's called Sicilian yellow, which is the closest pencil in the Derwent set that is, well, it's the closest to Caucasian skin. I only put down a tiny little bit in the shadow areas, and I'm gonna pull the pigment across the face, and like that I'm achieving lights and darks on her skin or on her face with just one pencil and not a lot of shading or coloring color options. And then I went on to the hair. She has black hair, and I decided to use indigo, Payne's Gray, and black. I'm starting with the Payne's Gray here, coloring in all the highlights on her hair. And then I went in with the black to fill in the shadow parts. And then I decided, okay, it's a little easier for me to decide where the lights and darks go if I outline her hair, all the different kinds of strands that I had already given her in the sketch, which is hardly visible on camera, but that's kind of the intention because I didn't want my sketch outlines to peek through. That's why I chose a yellow pencil, because I could easily go over that with any type of color. So that's actually another tip. Don't always use graphite if you don't want to see your outlines after you're done with painting. Maybe use a yellow or a blue or orange pencil, whatever the major color of your painting is going to be. And you could use graphite very easily if you plan to outline your painting, say, with an ink pen. But if you don't, which I wasn't planning on doing, then maybe use yellow. So I'm just going around her different parts of the hair, like strands of hair, shading them. Black for the shadow parts, gray and a little bit of indigo for the lighter parts. And then it's, well, time to liquefy the pigment again. And another thing I can only recommend is to not only use black for black hair, because that would look very flat. And even on black hair, there's highlights, there's a shimmer. So find a color that you could use to color or paint, draw, whatever, the highlights of your hair. And another tip is to maybe have a color that is in your background or in the surroundings, because different lights bounce off differently on hair. So say she is in a very green environment or a very yellow environment, I would have not chosen gray or blue, but maybe like a yellow or a green for the highlights, because, well, light bounces off and therefore has a different color too. Went on to the details of her face, so coloring in her lips with a cool red tone. I think it's the same one that I used on that lion figure. And then, of course, I'm grounding her as well, because she's not a floater, she's not flying, she's not a dragon. So I went with another green just to have a little bit of a different kind of a color coming in. First, I had thought maybe like a yellow or a brownish ground, but that would have been too boring. With the green ground, the red and the green are the quote-unquote focal point colors. They are the standout colors, and all the others are quite muted. They are, well, the main object colors. Once that was dry, I went in with my colored pencils again, just defining some of the lines, adding a little bit of a detail, especially on her hair, because I didn't want that to look too frizzy. And the colored pencils work very well on top of Inktense on this particular paper. On a different kind of paper, like say in coloring books, they don't work well. I would go for a wax-based pencil then, but with the, depending on the paper, of course, but on watercolor paper, there's enough texture, there's enough grip for the oil-based pencils to hang on to on top of the Inktense, which do have quite the chalky finish on other kinds of papers. I have that quite often in coloring books, that they're kind of chalky and you can't really put any polychromos on top, I would go to the Prismacolors then, or just my very cheap Faber-Castell classic colors. They're the supermarket, grocery store type of color pencils. I also gave her details on her eyes and eyebrows with that same pencils. I'm gonna go on top with my Copic multi-liner in a minute, but I went with the polychromos first. For her eyes, they are brown, and since she's big enough to actually see her eye color, I chose to bring in Faber-Castell brush pens. But first I had to, well, repair a tiny little bit on her face, and I went in with a couple of other shades of color with the polychromos, just to enhance a tiny little bit of shadow and adding detail to her face that I couldn't do with the Inktense, because, well, it's just, though this is a bigger painting, it's just too tiny. So I chose a very dark brown for her eyes, because that is what I was told her eye color is. Put the highlights on top with a white gel pen. And I think that was that. I will definitely sign the painting, but I think I didn't do anything else. If I did, you will see it in a second. But I'm very close to the end of the video, so this is the time for me to start the outro, which is thank you very much for watching. If you have questions, comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I will see you in 2 weeks with another character painting for my DSA campaigns. And I would very much appreciate if you like this video. That lets me know that I'm doing things that you want to see. And if you're new to the channel and haven't yet, please subscribe and peruse the channel. There's lots of artwork videos, coloring videos, board game videos, MS related videos, my vlog, all the different kinds of things. Peruse it and see if you like it. And I'm gonna see you in 2 weeks on this format, and then it's back to a tinier painting. Have a wonderful day, guys. Take good care. Bye.